Welcome to the Heart-Led Business Show, where compassion meets commerce and leaders lead with love. Join your host, Tom Jacobs, as he delves into the insightful conversations with visionary business leaders who defy the status quo, putting humanity first and profit second. From heartfelt strategies to inspiring stories, this podcast is your compass in the world of conscious capitalism. So buckle up and let your heart guide your business journey.
Get ready to elevate your enthusiasm, folks. Today on the Heart-Led Business Show, we're welcoming the wonderful Edward Feldman, an alchemist of alignment with decades of dedication in chiropractic care and a heart centered on holistic healing. Edward's journey from Feldenkrais to Craniosacral Biodynamics is nothing short of inspiring. So join us as we explore his heart-led business. Welcome to the show, Edward.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for inviting me.
Great to have you here. I always love to speak with chiropractors on the Heart-Led Business Show because there's a really nice dynamic between heart-led and profit-led in that industry, and we can definitely dive a little bit into that. The first question I always ask on the show is, what's your definition of a heart-led business?
What comes to mind is really leading with your heart. And what does that mean? It means coming into your own authenticity, coming into your own body and being real and authentic with your clients. So if you're present, that is the most important factor I find above any technique, is just being present with the person so that the person, the client, patient feels gotten, they feel witnessed, they feel received. And when that happens, you don't have to worry about technique. Believe me, I studied every technique in the book. And the more I came into myself, the way I just described it, the more I became successful. I never had to worry about getting patients or retaining patients. They just came back and back because of that. So that would be my definition.
Oh, that's great. I've not heard that definition before. That is a great definition too, by the way. Yeah, just, again, putting the people first, but also making sure that you're authentic and you're making sure that they're being heard and understood, especially in the medical profession. You don't hear of that too often, especially with medical doctors who have to see 50 patients a day. You just don't get heard or understood. How have you been able to balance that with your practice?
I just want to add on to what I said is that I practice a method called the Biodynamic Craniosacral therapy, which is all about working with this inner energetic rhythm. We call it the tide. It's the same really energy force, biodynamic energy force that's in the universe that gives life to, in the spring, to all the plants and shrubs that's within us. And that's what the health is. So you trust what we call trusting the tide to do the work. So that's a big jump, right? Instead of thinking you have to make the perfect adjustment or fix the person, right? If you're totally hung up on fixing the person, you're not allowing the person's own inherent healing forces to come through. So the more I get out of the way, not just physically, but intentionally, when I get out of the way and trust this tide to do the work, then the results are astounding. That's what the universe is based on, this energy that pervades the universe.
Yeah. And so how are you balancing that in the healthcare industry and chiropractic also? A lot of practices have to see so many patients just to make it viable. So how do you balance that in your practice?
That's a really important question to look at, a really important aspect. I was fortunate. Early on in 1995, I bought a residential commercial zone building. So a house, right? So I could practice out of my house, right? So I wasn't under the same constraint that most people are, right? That most people, you have to knock out 30, 40, 50 people a day easily and just to meet your nut. So fortunately, I could focus on my own healing methods and I could get by seeing 6, 8 people a day. I didn't have to see 50 or 60. It's a different model. I'll be honest with you. What my practice, if you walked in, you'd say, wow, this doesn't look like a chiropractic office, because it's out of my home. It's much more relaxed and set up in that manner. I have to admit, I've integrated. So let me just be clear. I've integrated these 3 body work modalities: chiropractic, non-force chiropractic, biodynamic craniosacral therapy, and the Feldenkrais method. So search for healing I realized there's not one thing is going to do it, whether it's for myself or for others. And so I incorporated and integrated these 3 approaches because some people need movement awareness, the Feldenkrais method. Some people have traumas from childhood, from car accidents, from blows to the head. They need the biodynamic craniosacral therapy to lift the traumas out of the body. And of course, regular chiropractic is essential in terms of alignment and figuring out where somebody's not aligned properly. So it took a while, but I've integrated these 3 approaches into my practice.
Yeah. And I can see why you can only see 6 to 8 patients when you're really focusing quite a bit on their care and what their body actually
Well, the
needs to
sessions are
feel.
45 minutes and 50.
Oh.
They're not 10 minutes. They're really being with the client. And that I can't stress that enough. Literally, when that person's nervous system feels that you're with them, and that system feels witness, it lets go. It feels safe enough to let go. And then the healing really begins. It sounds, I don't know if it sounds corny or trite, but that's really where it's at. That's really where it's
Definitely, it sounds a little woo, but that's cool. As long as it's working and the people are benefiting from it, then it's awesome.
I would rather see myself. I'm after definitive results. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I don't want to just give somebody temporary relief and then they come in 2 days, 3 days, a week, or 5 days. I'd rather see really transformative changes where they start to cumulatively integrate and add on the changes week to week that we do. And I've got people who see me. I see people who've been elsewhere. They don't come to me firsthand, first shot. They've been to the other chiros. They've been to acupuncture. They've been to their pain medicine person. And so they're really coming with a chronic problem, something that hasn't resolved. So that's the kind of person I'm attracting into my practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's kind of the last ditch effort almost. Oh, so when did you start your practice?
So I actually graduated chiropractic school in 1978. So I'm approaching my 47th year now being in practice. I also integrate clinical nutrition. So there's 4 different modalities I use. But anyway, yeah, I graduated. I worked for other people at first. I started my own practice, and then I'm a New Yorker. So I practiced in New York briefly, and then I moved to California. And to be honest with you, you asked about success and failures. I failed when I first got out there. Now, why did I fail? It wasn't because I still was pretty good clinically, even at that stage, but I just didn't have it together personally. I'll admit it. I wasn't integrated enough. And that's why I say it's such a key component. Who you are is going to come through, not just managing the business. That, of course, you need those skills, but those skills come from just paying attention to the books and paying attention to your numbers. But you have to generate the consistency and the wherewithal of being in practice. That's what a business is, right? Consistency, showing up every day. And so I was a late bloomer. I wasn't there yet. And so it took a while. I moved back to the East Coast. I moved to Boston. And then even there, I still didn't initially do well. And so there were a couple of failures along the way, I'll admit it. And then finally, and this is important to realize, that you have to make mistakes. If you're going to grow up to be a good person, human being, and you're going to grow into your own. See, that's the other thing I wanted to discuss this morning. You have to be yourself. You can't just copy someone else. And that works to a degree, but I think personally, if you want sustainability, I could practice. I'm 75. I could practice. I could go another 10 years because, I love what I do. I take care of myself. And so anyway, the point is that when you come into your own essence, who you really are, you can continue to grow and evolve and be successful. Again, what's your definition of success? If you want a high 6-figure or 7-figure income, then this is not the discussion you probably want to be listening to. I'm not your guy, obviously. But if you're interested in enjoying your life and having a balanced life and being sustainable, like I said, for a very long time, and then I think this makes sense. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So at what point did you leave working for somebody else and then work for yourself and start your own practice?
At different junctures, I was practicing in Boston. I guess it was in Boston. I had a relationship that ended after 5 years, very intense relationship. And I really couldn't even focus on my practice. So I started working for a very high volume PI chiropractor. So I was seeing, for me, it was a lot. It was like 45 people a day. That was a lot. And I learned to become an excellent adjuster. That was the good side. The bad side was this guy was an abuse. The owner was abusive. But the fact is, I learned to really crack backs, crack in the best sense of the word. I felt I could adjust anyone after a while. And I did, and I still gave a good service, even though it was a very short service. It was 5 minutes, but it was a very explicitly done piece of work. And so I worked for him for a year and a half, and then I left, and then I eventually moved down to New Jersey and started my own practice. Actually, I worked for 2 other people when I first moved to Jersey and had similar experiences. And I believe failure along the way is essential to becoming your own person. Because I'll tell you something, I'll share something personal. My dad, during the 80s, was looking at my best friend and my first cousin's husband, who I both turned on to chiropractic. And they became outrageously successful. They were practicing in Connecticut, which was the best state to practice in the 80s in terms of insurance. They made like high 6-figure incomes. And they were saying 60, 80 people a day. And my dad would turn to me and say, "What's your story? Why don't you just crack some backs and make some money? It's ridiculous." So I just said, okay. But I still had an interest in these other things, these other modalities, because that's where my heart was. And so it wasn't until the early 2000s and beyond that those other modalities came in, or I could really rely on them and execute them well. And so then I had the kind of practice I always dreamed of. A lot of chiropractors dream, they say, when I make enough money, I'm going to have this type of practice, because they have to make money. They have a family, they have a wife and kids. So they always feel constrained. Yeah, of course I need to produce X number. But there's going to be a percentage of people out there, chiros, who are going to say, you know what, was really my dream, to practice this way and get definitive results, get really great results. And so I hung in there with that dream, even though the numbers at first were terrible. They weren't good. So, but eventually it paid off, where I could keep practicing in a viable way, a very viable way, and be happy with it. I don't know, it's really important.
Do you think the experiences that you had working for the other high volume clinics shaped how you wanted to practice when you started your own practice?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I wanted more definitive results, right? Even in my first couple of years as a chiropractor, I used to see the same problems come back every 3 days, right? Somebody would have the same sacroiliac that was out of alignment, and I'd do the same adjustment and they'd be back. I said, this is crazy. Why would I want to keep doing the same thing over and over? Now, a lot of people, some people don't think that way. They don't think to even say that. But to me, that didn't make sense. So I wanted something that would stick, because, by the way, the bones are supported by the soft tissue, right? The fascia, the connective tissue, the muscles, the ligaments. It's not just, even the best chiropractic manipulation needs the supporting structure to be on board, right? So I believe in order for the adjustment to truly hold, otherwise it's just going to be very temporary. That's my opinion.
Yeah, because if the muscle's not in alignment, or the fascia or what have you, it's pulling that joint out of alignment. So you have to fix the root cause versus just putting a Band-Aid on it, which is just the quick adjustment.
Yeah, and then nutrition also helps, because systemically, if somebody's not doing well systemically and they have lots of issues, that also supports the adjustment, right? So you have to make sure that, that's happening. Like when I incorporated nutrition into my practice in the early, about 2010, that made a big difference, because people's adjustments would hold longer. They would definitely really helped tremendously.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So as you were starting your practice, what kind of issues came up where you kind of questioned keeping a heart-led business versus just going back to the mill, the back crack mill, so to speak? What kept you going?
That's a good question. I don't know. Something, it's a great question. Something inside me said, I felt compelled to practice in a certain way. Again, I'm going to say this is not for everyone. I didn't have children, so I didn't have the same expenses and the same pulls that other people have. I could devote myself to learning these other modalities. So I'll admit it. I had a home office. I didn't have the same overhead, but I still had to maintain that inner drive to be, first of all, the best I could be in terms of a healing truly what it means to be a healing practitioner. That word is thrown around, but really I took it very seriously in terms of seeing definitive results that stuck, results that the person would get after months, couple months of care, 3, 4, 5, 6 months of care. They would be on their own and they'd come back periodically, but it wasn't every couple of days or week. So I felt good about that they had achieved that place. So I was always driven to, I don't know what the word is, excel. It's bandied around a lot. If you look at any of these great athletes, you listen to their stories, these guys are always practicing endlessly. The Michael Jordans, they don't rest on their laurels. They're constantly improving their game. It's amazing. I felt like that. I always was like taking seminars, but more than that, also work, and this is important to mention, working myself personally, because I feel if you're not facing your demons and your shadow aspects of yourself, you can't be genuine. Along the way, doing these modalities, the Feldenkrais method and biodynamic craniosacral therapy, you learn to feel what's called the felt sense. So what's the felt sense? The felt sense is the sensations and feeling tones in your body that you can name and you can perceive. So in other words, the inner and outer is congruent. You're not just operating from your mind and being analytical. Yeah, of course you have to do that. You have to use your educated mind. But the more you come into this felt sense, the more you can make direct contact with the client. That's what I was saying earlier. And the client perceives it and their nervous system perceives it. And so your touch is then perceived in a way that it really registers a change in the person. It really makes a change. It's not just superficial. And the other thing is a lot of my clients would come back and I would do different things each time. I didn't do the same one every time. That's crazy. I have to admit, everything I'm saying is not your business-led approach to having a successful practice. It's not just because some practice management guru says, these are the numbers, you really have to produce X, Y, Z. No, it makes sense to you. You have to live with yourself, right? You have to live with your wife. You have to look in the mirror and say, I'm happy. This is the kind of, and that's what's enabled me to keep practicing now into my 47th year. It's remarkable. My friends are retired.
Yeah, of course. Now, Edward, you obviously spent a lot of time educating on the different modalities. What have you done to educate on the business side of running a small business?
That's another good question. I've taken my seminars, my share of business-related seminars, of course. I got to a model or a place that feels comfortable to me, right? First of all, you have to, again, tune into the person and see when they're from the very start, from the very first phone conversation to I give a free 15-minute offering, and then they usually come in, and then we have our first session. I spend a good chunk of time really asking them 6 or so, 8 questions about them, about their problem and what they've done for it. Moreover, how it affects them. What do they really want? Of course, everybody wants to be out of pain. That's a given. But moreover, what else? Oh yeah, I want to play with my grandkids. I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. I want to travel. I want to be able to travel with my partner. I want to get up without any pain. I want to just go about my business. In other words, they want to be able to do their life without even thinking about their problem. They just want to do their life. They feel like, yeah, I made the right decision coming to this guy. He really gets what I'm saying. I'm just not checking off back pain or neck pain, right? Then I give them a first session, which includes an exam, but it also includes a treatment. Now, that's supposed to be taboo in the world of healing chiropractic. But to me, I want to have the person register an experience because this is outside the box. So at that point, I can then suggest, based on my clinical observation, that you need 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 sessions for us to go ahead. And they're ready to buy a package at that point. Now, why are they ready to buy a package? A, they felt heard. B, they had an experience of the work that was radically different than anything else. This is, I think, a good point for your listeners. They've had an experience that's radically different. It really impacted them. And by the way, when you talk about the success and failures along the way, I used to, at first, just copy other people's adjustments. Like you'd see a great chiropractor, you'd see a great, and you try to emulate or imitate them. But again, you have to come into your own so that you can really meet the person where they are and deliver that kind of service. So when the person, has all of what I just described, right? They're ready to buy. That's pretty remarkable. They're ready to spend $2,300, right? That's pretty remarkable because most people don't can't or won't do that because they feel it's too much. So I'm saying the customer is ready because I've given them a very level-headed. I would do that if somebody treated me the way I just suggested. I would say, yeah, okay, it's more than I thought it would be, but fine. And by the way, I don't do insurance. I submit for people. I'll submit for their insurance, but really, it's a cash practice in that sense. They're paying me directly because why? Because my kind of practice is so outside the box in terms of what an insurance is going to pay $45, whether you spend an hour or spend two seconds, let alone 2 minutes.
Yeah, right.
They could care less. They could care less about the person's healing. Is that helpful, what I just said? Is that makes
Absolutely. One of the key points here that you brought up is that experience, because obviously do a lot of reading business books and things like that. And then there's a quote that people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. I don't know who said that, but it always stuck with me because that's the experience you want to give people. And that's when people feel cared for, they're going to come back for that, especially in an industry where they don't get that on a regular basis. And so you stand out.
My brother, who was a dentist, who still practices one day, where he covers another person. He's actually 2 years older than me. Even in dentistry, which is a pretty hardcore black and white thing, that's the number one thing. So yeah, of course, in this profession, you have to demonstrate that. They have to feel gotten, so to speak, attuned to. I tell people when I do my biodynamic cranial work, they say, "What's this? I don't even feel you doing anything." You know what? I actually had this Jewish woman once say to me, "Can't my husband do this?" I said, "Yeah, sure. What does he do? Root canal or for you as well?" It's like unbelievable she said that. But they have to feel gotten. They really have to feel that you're getting them in a deep way.
Oh yeah, when you experience it yourself with any business, and I think this is for any business, it could be making widgets or providing a service, you still have to make that customer feel heard and understood and appreciated. People like that appreciation. And so I think that's a really great point that you bring up.
And they stick with you for 20, 25, 30 years. They stick with you because of that. They don't go elsewhere. They come back with new injuries, new complaints, new issues.
Yeah. And I've also found that even if you've made small mistakes along the way, maybe it's a billing error or something like that. Right. If they have a great experience with you, they're a lot more forgiving, a lot more accepting. It's like, hey, yeah, everybody makes mistakes.
Absolutely.
Versus, yeah, and if you're a very just, okay, this is the rules, A, B, and C, come in, get adjusted, you leave. There's no connection. So people are more likely to just like, hey, really.
Again, yeah, sorry to interrupt. My brother used to, again, say the same thing. The people who sue you, the people who go after you, right? They go after you because they don't have that trust. They don't have that connection with you. You would. I don't think it's possible if you have that for the person to sue you. I don't think that happens, frankly.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah, absolutely. Edward, it's come to that time in the show. Unfortunately, this has been a great conversation, by the way. But how can people learn more about you and your practice and working with you if they're in the Jersey area?
So the first thing to do is to, copy down my website. It's my last name, Feldman, Feldman, wellness. So one word, feldmanwellness.com. And this website, believe me, we've crafted it. Me and my web designer have crafted it for over 15 years now, 15, 16 years.
Wow.
And she's great I give her content and she puts it together. So there's a wealth of information there. There's a ton of testimonials. There's a ton of videos. There's a ton of blog posts. It describes each modality with write-ups and videos. So you can really get the full flavor of each technique, each modality I use. So that's number one. And I think you can even get a free Feldenkrais awareness through movement lesson, a movement awareness lesson by just submitting your email. So that's first and foremost. I'm on Facebook as well under Feldman Wellness, my first name, and also under Feldman Wellness. I'm on Instagram. So there's lots of ways to find me. My number is on my website, but I'll just give it to you. It's 609-252-1766. And again, my email's edward.feldman8@verizon.net. But the easiest, is going to feldmanwellness.com.
Awesome. Cool. That's awesome that you put together that resource for people. That's great, especially around modalities that people might not be really familiar with. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Edward, thank you so much for being on the show. And I certainly appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much for having me, Tom. I appreciate it. I really do.
And thank you, listeners, for listening and watching the show today. I certainly appreciate it. I know Edward appreciates it as well. And make sure you're checking out everything that he's doing, and we'll provide all of that information into the show notes. So just click down below, look in those show notes, and click away and educate yourself on some of these new modalities as well, and see what a real heart-led business is all about. And until next time, lead with your heart.
You've been listening to the Heart-Led Business Show, hosted by Tom Jacobs. Join us next time for another inspiring journey into the heart of business.